She made 4 mistakes in the span of 11 minutes, and they cost her everything she had spent 6 years building. The first mistake was telling him where she would be. The second was believing the crowded street would protect her. The third was choosing a car at random from a line of 3 identical black sedans parked outside the Dongseongro Arcade building on a Tuesday evening in late March. The fourth mistake, if you could call it that, was climbing into the back seat of a car whose owner was already sitting in it. The door clicked shut behind her. "You picked the wrong car," said a woman in the front passenger seat not unkindly without turning around. 11 words. And yet, for Yuna crouched low in the back seat of a stranger's vehicle with the breath knocked out of her and the sound of her husband's footsteps still ringing in the architecture of her memory, those 11 words were not a threat. They were improbably the first honest sentence anyone had spoken to her in longer than she could properly measure. By the way, wherever in the world you're watching from right now, let me know in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Okay, where were we? She had picked the wrong car. This was true. But the door was locked now, and outside the tinted window, the man she was hiding from was moving through the crowd with the systematic patience of someone who had done this before. And the man in the back seat beside her, the one she had not yet looked at directly, had not told the driver to open the door. That fact, quiet and precise, would change everything. His name, though Yuna did not know it yet, was Kang Se-hoon. He was 44 years old, and he had spent 22 of those years constructing an institution so deliberately invisible that the 2,000 people who depended on it for their livelihoods rarely knew his name, and the 400 people who feared it never said it aloud in a room with open windows. He controlled import and distribution corridors running from the port at Incheon through 11 inland cities, managed the financing arrangements for 46 legitimate mid-size enterprises, and had built a reputation over 2 decades on a single governing principle that his people repeated to one another in shorthand. He noticed what mattered, and he never pre-decided what that was. The woman in the front seat was Mireille. She had been with Kang Se-hoon for 17 years. Her title, if pressed, was Chief of Operations, but the title was inadequate. She arranged, confirmed, and remembered everything. She had a memory that was not so much photographic as architectural, a thing you could walk through, room by room, and she used it with an economy of motion that made the people around her feel, over time, gently ashamed of their own attention spans. Tonight, she had been describing to Kang Se-hoon the particulars of a supply arrangement in the Eastern Corridor when the back door of the car had opened and a young woman had thrown herself inside, in one fast, compact motion, the way a person moves when they are not thinking anymore, only surviving. Mireille had stopped speaking mid-sentence. She finished the sentence now. "The eastern window closes at the end of the month," she said, returning smoothly to where she had left off. "The alternative routing adds 60 kilometers but loses the choke point." Kang Se-hoon had not looked at the woman in his back seat. He was looking straight ahead at the amber wash of Dongseongro at 7 in the evening, the neon signs just beginning to assert themselves against the last pale margin of sky, the pedestrian crowd moving in its usual irregular rhythm. He was watching a man in a dark coat moving against that rhythm, moving with purpose. "Who is he to you?" he said. His voice was not loud. It had the quality of something said in an empty room. Yuna did not answer immediately. She was pressed against the far door, her breathing almost controlled, now watching the man in the dark coat through the tinted glass. 3 years of marriage. Before that, 2 years of a relationship that had felt like standing at the edge of something beautiful, not yet understanding that the drop was below her, not in front of her. "My husband," she said. The single short word and the pause before it said everything else. Kang Se-hoon watched the man in the dark coat stop, scan the line of parked vehicles, linger on the middle sedan 3 cars ahead, then move past it. He had the particular stillness of someone capable of immense patience, which was, in Kang Se-hoon's experience, a specific variety of danger. "Where do you need to go?" Kang Se-hoon said. Not a question. a procedural inquiry. "I don't have anywhere," Yuna said. And then, because the honest sentence had come out before she could manage it, "I left." Marae turned around then, not to assess threat to sea. She looked at Yuna for 3 seconds. "There's a residence on Buchonro," she said to Kang Se-hoon. "Empty until Friday." Kang Se-hoon said nothing. He watched the man in the dark coat reach the end of the block, pause at the corner, and turn left. "Drive," Kang Se-hoon said. The driver, who had sat through all of this with the particular composure of someone well paid for composure, pulled smoothly from the curb. Wayuna sat in the back seat of a stranger's car as it moved through the Amber City, and she did not cry, because she had used up the version of herself that cried at some point in the past year and could not locate it anymore. What she felt instead was something colder and more durable. She felt the quality of the silence in the car. It was not hostile silence, not performative silence, not the oppressive quiet she had lived inside for 3 years. It was the silence of a space that had been organized by someone who thought carefully, and it rested against her like something structural. She did not know yet whose car she was in. She would find out. The residence on Buchonro was a narrow 4-story building tucked between a tea merchant and a restored Hanok guest house. Its facade, the dull gray of poured concrete that had been smoothed rather than decorated, as if the building had decided it preferred to be overlooked. The 3rd-floor apartment had 2 rooms, kitchen, the width of an arm span, and a window that faced a private courtyard full of potted ferns that someone tended with visible care. Marae showed her the door code. She said 3 things. There was food in the refrigerator. The building had a side exit onto the lane. The code changed on Friday morning, so she would need to have made a decision about her next movement before then. Then she left. Yuna stood in the middle of the 2-room apartment and listened to the building settle around her. The ferns in the courtyard were motionless in the still air. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere below muffled, a radio played a song she had known as a child, one of those melodic accidents that burrow in and wait. She sat down on the floor because there was no furniture except a low platform bed, and she did not want to go directly to sleep. And she thought, with the analytical precision she had mostly suppressed for 3 years, about what she had just done. She had left. She had no bag. She had her phone, which she turned off because he could track it, and she had 4,300, one in her coat pocket from a purchase she had made that morning before everything accelerated. She had left behind her documentation, her credentials, the external drive she kept in the bottom of a shoebox that contained 6 years of professional work. She had left in the clothes she was wearing because the alternative had been not leaving at all. This was the mathematics of her situation. She was 31 years old. She had a master's degree in architectural restoration that she had never finished using because the marriage had contracted her world to the size he preferred. She had no family in the city. Her mother lived in the South, and calling her meant a series of conversations Yuna did not have the reserves for. She knew one person in Seoul well enough to trust, and that person worked for a law firm in Mapogu and had sent her exactly 3 carefully worded text messages over the past year that had all contained the same embedded instruction. "When you're ready, call." She was ready. Her phone was off. She lay down on the platform bed in her coat and looked at the ceiling, which was bare concrete, perfectly flat, and in the darkness it became the most peaceful surface she had encountered in years. She slept. 3 days passed. The food in the refrigerator was simple and sufficient. She ate. She slept more than she had in 2 years. She sat by the courtyard window and watched the ferns and thought about her external drive and her documentation and the 6 years of work she had left behind. And on the 3rd day, she came to a conclusion that arrived not as a decision, but as a fact. She had finished denying. She was going to need to recover those materials because they were not replaceable and they were hers, and no version of her future could be built on their absence. On the morning of the 3rd day, There was a knock at the door. She opened it. Mireille stood in the corridor with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that communicated without any supplementary language that this was not a social call. Friday is tomorrow, Mireille said. I know. They sat at the narrow kitchen counter. The coffee was good. Yuna had the sensation, which she had not felt in some time, of being in the presence of someone who had thought before they arrived. What do you need? Miri said. It was the same grammatical structure Kang Se-hun had used in the car. Yuna noticed this. It was a question that carried no assumption about what the answer would be, no pre-constructed set of acceptable responses. It was a genuine inquiry. There's a storage facility in Seongbuk, Yuna said, and an apartment I need to return to once. I need 40 minutes inside. Miri looked at her. He knows the storage facility, Miri said. It was not a question. He doesn't know what's in it. What is? Yuna told her. 6 years of restoration survey drawings, site documentation, and a set of independent assessments she had produced for 3 different heritage bodies before the marriage had absorbed her professional existence. The assessments had never been published. 2 of them contained findings that, if formally submitted, would materially affect the outcome of a development dispute currently moving through a cultural preservation tribunal. She had been keeping them because she had not been in a position to use them, and she had not destroyed them because she could not. Mireille was quiet for a long time. You didn't mention that to me 3 days ago, she said. You didn't ask. Something in Mireille's expression shifted. Not surprise, exactly. More like recognition. I'll arrange transport, Mireille said. You'll have a window of 4 hours, not 40 minutes. Someone will be with you who knows the neighborhood. You go once, you take everything, you don't go back. Yuna nodded. She did not ask why this woman, who owed her nothing, was organizing this. She understood that asking the question directly would produce a partial answer. The complete answer would reveal itself over time, which was how all true things revealed themselves. It was weeks later that she understood the complete picture, and it came to her in pieces, the way Mireille herself must have calculated that it would. The first piece came from the driver, whose name was Do-yoon, on the morning of the extraction. He drove her to the storage facility in Seongbuk-gu, waited on the street while she recovered the drive and 2 document cases, and then drove her to the apartment while she still had a key. He said almost nothing during either drive, but when she came back to the car the second time, carrying a bag that now held the sum of everything she intended to keep from that version of her life, he said, she had a sister who left a difficult situation. It took 4 years. She thinks about it every day. He did not say who she was. He did not need to. Yuna sat in the back seat with the bag on her lap and looked out the window at the city she was deciding to reclaim, and she let the information settle. Mireille had not helped her out of obligation to Kang Se-hun's household. She had helped her because she recognized the specific geometry of the situation, the way someone recognizes a landscape they have crossed before at night. In the same kind of weather, the recognition was not pity. It was competence applied to something that mattered. The second piece came from Kang Se-hun himself, and it arrived in the form of a meeting she had not requested. She had been in the Bukchonro apartment for 3 more weeks beyond that Friday, on an arrangement that Mireille had quietly extended without comment. She had been making calls, reconnecting with the law firm contact in Mapogu, beginning the formal process of understanding what her documentation could accomplish in the tribunal context. She had, in short, begun to function as herself again, which felt both ordinary and enormous. Kang Se-hun's household occupied the top floor of the building. She had known this from the 3rd day. She had never encountered him on the stairs or in the courtyard. She had the impression of a man whose presence in a space was organized so deliberately that you experienced the effects without the exposure. The meeting happened in the courtyard on a Friday afternoon when the light was long and the ferns cast thin shadows across the stones. He came down with 2 cups of tea, set one on the low stone ledge beside the bench where she was sitting with her documentation spread around her, and sat down in the chair opposite. He looked at her work. Heritage assessment, he said. Yes, the same book. Redevelopment case. She looked up. You know it, she said. I hold a minority interest in 2 of the adjacent properties, he said. I have for 4 years. I have been waiting for the survey materials that were apparently never submitted. The courtyard was very quiet. A fern trembled slightly in a draft from the lane entrance. They would work against your interest, Eunice said carefully. They would work against the developer's interest, Kang Se-hun said. Those are not the same thing. I bought adjacent to that block because I believe the heritage designation protects value over 20 years. The developer believes in 18 months. We have a disagreement. He drank his tea. I do not tell you what to do with your work, he said. I am telling you what I know so that you can make a decision with full information. That is a different thing. She looked at him. 44 years old, and there was something in his face that was not warmth exactly, but was close to what warmth looks like when it has been organized by someone who has spent a long time deciding how to use it. Why did you keep the door locked? She said that night. You didn't know me. He considered the question as if it deserved that treatment. Because he was outside, he said. And you were inside. The arithmetic was not complicated. She thought about that for a long time afterward. The arithmetic was not complicated. It had spent 3 years inside a situation whose arithmetic had been made to seem impossibly complex. All variables and contingencies and her own inadequate judgment, and the 1,000 reasons why the numbers would never balance in her favor. And here was a man who had looked at the same set of facts and produced a single clean result in under 4 seconds. She submitted the assessments to the tribunal the following Tuesday, through the law firm in Mapogu, under her name, with full documentation of provenance and methodology. The submission was complete, professionally formatted, and inchallengeable on technical grounds because the work was genuinely excellent, produced across 6 years with the particular rigor of someone who had loved the discipline before life interrupted it. The tribunal acknowledged receipt within 24 hours. Her husband's family held a 10% stake in the development consortium. She had not known this when she submitted. She found out 3 days later from the law firm contact who delivered the information with the careful neutrality of someone who understood that the intersection was real, but the submission was independently valid and legally protected. She sat with that information. She had not aimed at him. She had aimed at the work, but the work was the work, and the truth of a heritage assessment did not change its character based on who was made uncomfortable by it. Her husband found her 2 months later, not at the Bukchon Row address, which she had long since left. He found her through a professional registration she had filed, her name reattached to her credentials, her practice newly listed with the Restoration Practitioners Registry. He found her the way people with resources find people who have stopped hiding, which is through the ordinary administrative channels of a person who has decided to exist again. He arrived at the shared office space in Mapogu on a Wednesday morning. He was calm. This was the version of him she had feared most. The agitated version was legible, telegraphed its intentions. The calm version did not. He sat across from her at the small conference table, and he said, in the measured voice he used when he was most dangerous, "You've made things very complicated. 7 words." She thought about Murray's 11. The comparison was instructive. "I submitted accurate work," she said. "You knew what it would do. I knew what it would do to the development application," she said. "That's all I knew." He looked at her for a long time. He was deciding something. She could feel the machinery of his calculation moving behind his eyes, and it was familiar. That machinery, she had lived 3 years inside the products of it. "I want you to file a correction," he said, "a methodological revision, something that creates ambiguity in the findings." She looked at him. "No," she said. One word. 4 letters. He leaned forward. What happened next happened quickly, and it had to do with the fact that the conference table had a glass wall beside it facing the corridor, and in the corridor at that moment was her contact from the law firm, who had been expecting her for a meeting that had started 3 minutes ago, and who had also been expecting, quietly, that this morning might require a witness. There were also 3 things on the table that she had placed there before he arrived: a digital recorder, a folder of documentation, and her phone with the screen facing up. He saw them. He stopped. The silence in that moment was the most complete silence she had experienced since the courtyard with the ferns. The recorder has been running since you sat down, she said. He stood up. He smoothed his jacket. He looked at her one last time with something she now recognized as pure assessment, the look of someone recalculating, and then he walked out. He did not come back. The formal separation filing went through in the autumn of that year. The documentation she had provided to the law firm made the process straightforward in ways that had nothing to do with fortune and everything to do with 6 years of meticulous record-keeping by a woman who had understood, even while surviving, that documentation was the architecture of a future she had not yet been able to build. The tribunal issued its preliminary findings in November. The heritage designation was recommended. The Development Consortium's application was deferred pending a full review that the presiding officer noted in the published summary would need to account for survey evidence that should have been part of the original record. Kang Si-hyun's adjacent properties appreciated measurably within 14 months. He sent her a note. It was handwritten, 4 sentences, on plain, white paper with no letterhead. It said the work was excellent, the submission was correct. The 20-year argument has been settled in favor of the right side. That is not a small thing. She read it twice, then she filed it. Myrae called her that same week. Not on behalf of Kang Se-in, she made clear from the opening sentence. On her own behalf. There's a restoration project in Jeongno-gu, Myrae said. A consortium of building owners. They need an independent lead assessor. The time frame is 14 months. I'm not in the consortium. I'm just someone who knows about it. Yuna was quiet for a moment. Why are you telling me? Myrae's answer was neither immediate nor elaborate. It had the quality of something that had been sitting and had been decided not today but some time ago, waiting for the right moment to be said. Because you're good at it, she said, and because you're not hiding anymore. Those 2 things together are worth something. Yuna took the project. The first site visit was on a January morning, frost on the stone, the old buildings of Jeongno-gu coming through the light with the particular authority of structures that have survived a great deal and do not advertise it. She walked through the first building with her notebook and her camera and the recalibrated set of instruments she had repurchased with the first payment from the Mapogu legal work, and she felt the work come back to her, not like something recovered, but like something that had never actually gone anywhere, only been quieted, and was now speaking again at its proper volume. She noticed things. This had always been her nature. She noticed the load-bearing irregularities in the second-floor joinery that indicated a 19th century modification someone had later tried to conceal. She noticed the specific discoloration on the northern interior wall that indicated a different material substrate below the visible layer. She noticed that the building had a memory, the way all surviving structures do, a record inscribed in its fabric of every decision made about it across generations, and that reading that record was not interpretation but listening. She thought about what Do-hyun had said in the car. She thinks about it every day. She thought about Kang Se-hyun in the courtyard, his tea, his 4 sentences. The arithmetic was not complicated. She thought about the version of herself who had climbed into a stranger's car on a Tuesday evening in late March, running from one life, not yet equipped with the materials of the next one, and had found improbably a space organized by someone who had thought carefully. She wrote in her notebook, "A structure's integrity is not only what holds it up, it is also what allows it to hold other things." She paused. She wrote beneath it, "First note, new project." Then she kept working. She was noticed what mattered. She had never stopped. She had only for a period of years been denied the conditions under which noticing was possible. The conditions had changed. They had changed because she had left, which was the most structurally significant decision she had made since she first committed herself to understanding old buildings. And they had changed because of a car door that a man she did not know had declined to unlock for the right reason. Not sentiment. Arithmetic. The building around her settled gently, the way buildings do in cold weather, small, precise contraction, and she paused in her notes and listened to it and understood that this was also data, that even the sounds a structure makes in adjusting to its conditions are information. And she wrote that down too. The Jongno-gu project ran 15 months, 1 month over, because she found something on the 3rd floor of the 4th building that changed the scope. As good work tends to do, the finding was significant enough to generate a secondary study, which she led, which was published in a restoration journal the following spring, under her full name and credentials, both of which she had reclaimed with the same methodical thoroughness she applied to everything she chose to attend to. The publication was 3 things at once. It was professional documentation. It was a formal re-entry into a discipline she had loved since she was 19 years old, and first understood that old buildings were not relics, but arguments, structures that had survived because of the decisions embedded in their making and the care applied to their maintenance. And it was in the plainest possible sense her name on a piece of work she had done. Her name on work she had done. She was 33 years old. The separation had been final for 14 months. The legal process had concluded without escalation, in part because the documentation had been thorough, and in part because her husband had at some stage consulted someone who explained the arithmetic to him in terms he could understand. Her mother came to Seoul that spring for the publication reception at the journal office, a small event in a narrow room with good light and not enough chairs. Her mother stood in the corner and watched her daughter speak about the work, about the significance of the Jongno-gu findings, about what it meant to listen to a building instead of only reading it. And her mother, who had not known what to say for 3 years and had therefore said very little, understood now, without requiring an explanation, that something had completed itself, though completed was not the right word because the thing had not ended, it had resumed, which was a different and better outcome. Mireille was not at the reception. She sent a message that morning, 3 sentences. Congratulations on the publication. The work is correctly cited and the methodology is sound. That matters. Yuna read the message and thought about 11 words. She thought about how precision and warmth are not opposites, about how the most honest sentences are sometimes the shortest ones, about how a person can be known not by what they perform, but by what they attend to. She wrote back 4 words. I know. Thank you. Then she went to the reception and spoke about what she had found in old walls. And outside the narrow room, the spring light moved across the old city with the unhurried confidence of something that had been doing this for a long time and saw no reason to alter its pace, and the city held its shapes. Imperfect and durable and full of the record of every decision ever made about it, and a woman who had learned to read that record stood inside one room of it and said clearly what she saw. This is the thing about attention, about what it costs and what it builds, about what becomes visible when you stop deciding in advance what is worth seeing. Yuna had not pre-decided what mattered that Tuesday evening in late March when she pulled open the door of a black sedan and threw herself inside. She had only needed to not be found. What she found instead was the condition for everything else. A structure's integrity is not only what holds it up, it is also what allows it to hold other things. She had written that on a January morning in Jongno-gu as a note about a building. She had been writing about herself